I am really honored to be able to share a little bit, just some of my personal background as it relates to the Department of Youth Development. My name is Michael Massa, and I am with OYCR with the Health Policy Division. And prior to joining OYCR, I worked with the Los Angeles County Office of Education. And in 2019, I became the principal at Central Juvenile Hall, which was the largest juvenile hall in the state at the time. And it was really hard conditions. It really was a difficult place for our young people to navigate. There was just a lot going on. And then, in 2020, we all remember that COVID hit, and that created an additional barrier for our kids, right? All the programming was stopped, school went remote, family visitations were stopped. And it was just a really difficult time for our kids. And I just remember feeling super frustrated and sitting in my office one day when I got this email, and I'm putting in the chat now, this document was sent to me, this Youth Justice Reimagined. And I was like, what is this? And so I read through this document. I was like, oh my God, like this is what this is what the kids need, this reimagined vision of what youth justice should look like. And out of this was this idea, this crazy idea that LA County could develop a department really focused on youth development, not incarceration, not punitive ramifications, but really a structured, intentional approach to help young people who are really struggling with life circumstances and trying to just survive the best they could. And then I saw shortly thereafter this Department of Youth Development start to get created and fill these positions. And some of the people that I had worked with, like Marjan, who you're going to meet later, was with this arts program that used to come into the facility and bring a bright spot to the kids. And I was just, seeing all the right people coming together to really make this vision a reality. And to know that it is in existence, and the just amazing accomplishments that this department has been able to accomplish in such a very short time is absolutely remarkable. And to have the honor of continuing to work with DYD in a partnership on different initiatives has just been truly remarkable. And so with that, I just really want to offer my thanks and gratitude to all of the DYD team and the leadership. And with that, I will hand it over to the Department of Youth Development Director, Mr. David Carroll.
Good morning, everyone. Really happy to be here. Can't thank the OYCR team of both staff and consultants for all their help in preparing for this webinar, and more importantly, all the support that they have shared over the past 3 years, just about that I've been in this role. Judge Lucero, Dr. Massa, we have worked pretty closely together, and starting to work even more closely on a variety of initiatives, especially looking at girls and gender expansive youth and their decarceration. So I want to thank you for this opportunity to share more about the Department of Youth Development, what's happening here in LA, and how that can be hopefully replicated in a way in your various geographies across the state. Again, my name is David Carroll, he, him pronouns. I am the director of the Department of Youth Development. I have been here since about 6 months after the creation of the department. I was the first full-time director of the department. I come to this work from nonprofit, so this is very personal work to me. As a young person, I was born into the foster care system, shortly thereafter adopted, and lived in a single parent home where there were lots of opportunities for me to get in trouble. And fortunately, lots of organizations put their arms around me to try to help guide me through the process of growing up and going into career. So for me, this mission is personal. I want to provide those same types of opportunities for all of our young people, regardless of their circumstances. So just a little bit about me. Looking forward to today's conversation. This could be a 3-hour conversation, but of course, we're not going to do that to you. But we're going to focus on diversion specifically today, and looking at a deeper dive into that particular program. But I will touch on the various programs that DYD provides across the scope of prevention all the way through remedy. We can go on to the next slide. So, as Dr. Masta kind of touched on, LA had been the largest incarcerator of young people for decades, and there had been lots of community organizing and conversation around looking at a different way to treat young people. In around 2017, 2018, those conversations started to galvanize. More folks started to participate in those conversations. They started to gain some steam at both the local level as well as the state and national level. And a commission was created to look at a new way of treating young people in the justice system. That conversation turned into the document that Dr. Massa referenced, which is Youth Justice Reimagined, which called for a care first approach, a different way to look at young people, a way to hold young people accountable without necessarily focusing on punishment, right? Looking at ways to reduce harm, provide opportunities, and prevent repeat offenders and ultimately make the community safer. You'll hear me say this throughout the course of this conversation, but youth development is public safety, right? The more resources we can give our young people along the process, especially on the front end, the safer communities are, because when young people have what they need to thrive, we know that the likelihood of them engaging in risky behaviors decreases exponentially. So in 2020, the Board of Supervisors adopted Youth Justice Reimagined, which called for multiple initiatives, one of those being the creation of the Department of Youth Development. About 2 years later, the department was created, starting with our diversion program, which again, we will go into greater detail later in this conversation. And we began the process of hiring folks. And, I laugh and think about when I started, we had, I think, 5 or 6 full-time employees. Now we're at about 100 employees. So we have been building both infrastructure-wise and programmatically, for the last few years. We can go on to the next slide. And you know what? I should take a moment. I jumped in so fast. You'll be hearing from me a little bit too much today, but please recognize that there are members on my team that are here today that will be available for any questions that may come up. And you'll hear from a couple of members of the team just a little bit later. But just quickly, I did want to acknowledge that Danielle Vappy, our chief deputy, is on the call. Taylor Schooley, who leads our coordination and innovation team, you'll be hearing from in just a little while. Patricia Song, who leads our Youth Justice Supports and Services branch, is on the call. David Stevenson, who leads our communications, and he'll be dropping lots of resources in the chat as we continue to communicate. And Marjan Gadarzi, who runs our diversion program, you'll hear from quite a bit just a little bit later in the conversation. So forgive me for not starting with that. All right, so our mission. Our mission is to be a catalyst for transformation by providing innovative pathways to youth development through intersectional, anti-racist, youth-centered strategies so that all young people can access resources that nurture their growth, well-being, and connection to community. I normally don't like to read what's on slides, but I think it's very powerful to understand the breadth of the message, of the mission of DYD, and what our focus is. The focus is centering young people and centering community voice. We certainly believe that those that are closest to the problem are also closest to the solution. Our vision is to have a flourishing youth development ecosystem that builds safer communities and eliminates youth incarceration by ensuring that young people have the tools they need to thrive. A finer point on that, we don't want to just open the doors and let young people out, which is a common misconception, which is actually the very next slide. But what we want to replace that with are young people who have the tools and resources that they need so that they don't come into negative contact with law enforcement, so that they don't end up in the facilities, and therefore the reliance on carceral systems will decline substantially, and in our vision, completely. We can go on to the next slide. So some of the misconceptions about DYD. Do we only serve justice-involved youth? No, we serve a population from prevention all the way through young people who have fallen into the carceral setting. So Our goal is certainly to provide young people with the resources they need, again, to not find themselves in these carceral settings. Are we duplicating work that others are doing? Again, I would say no. Our goal is to, first of all, we're a small department, right, of 100 people. Some of the departments that we serve have 4 and 5 and 10,000 employees, right? So we are certainly not duplicating work that others are doing, but we look to partner with other departments to achieve the mission, again, of providing young people with the resources that they need. Some of our closest partners are DCFS, probation, LACO, the LA County Office of Education, Parks and Recreation, Arts and Culture. There's an adult department similar to DYD, which is called Justice Care and Opportunities, JCOD. So there are, and that's just a small list of the other departments, not to mention our friends and partners here with OYCR that we're working with for some of the LA-based strategies that they are involved in. One of the biggest questions I get, especially from law enforcement, is, are we holding young people accountable? And I would argue with every fiber in my being that diversion holds youth more accountable than arrest. Diversion causes that young person to examine why they were engaged in the behavior that they were engaged in. It also invites the family to be part of that deeper conversation. It also allows the victim, right, or the person harmed to be part of that conversation as that young person really addresses the whole situation that they were in. So our belief is that it holds young people more accountable just in a care approach as opposed to punishment alone. And does it only work? Does diversion only work for lower level of offenses? Our data, which you'll hear a little bit more about later, will actually show that the greatest impact is with the more serious offenses. So we are looking forward to sharing some of those statistics with you in just a moment. We can go on to the next slide. So this particular slide, I'm going to kind of blow through, but just to give you an idea, we did about a year-long study on defining youth, and our core age range is from 10 to 26. We recognize that that is a broad range, and there are different things that are happening to a young person, both physiologically and in society, I'd say it that way. But we do have interventions for young people from 10 to 26, especially on that older end with the Tay youth, with young people that are returning home from carceral facilities. We recognize that there is a lot of work that has to be done to reincorporate them into community. So certainly wanted to share, our universal goal, which is the improved well-being for all young people, the targeted strategies, and the population that we seek to serve, or that, quite honestly, are disproportionately impacted by the systems that we work within. Those living in under-resourced communities, disconnected from school and work, and of course impacted by the juvenile justice system. We can go on to the next slide. All right, this is the busiest slide in the history of slides, and I will acknowledge that. This is really the combination of like 6 different slides. This is the jazz music of slides. So we have different versions of this for different stakeholder groups. But what this is meaning to show, first of all, is kind of our path of a young person. We all start out on that development track, right? And for young people that come into contact with law enforcement, kind of our first off ramp, if you will, is working with young people that have come into negative contact with law enforcement. We know that they are a young person that is potentially going to be affected by the system, and we provide a higher level of support. That next level is where diversion lives, and we're certainly providing a even more intentional level of support for those young people. And then finally, for young people who find themselves in the carceral system, that is another off-ramp where we provide even more intensive services, both while the young person is in facility as well as when they return to community and as they progress towards adulthood. In the county, there are a series of intercepts that were created, and that is what the primary, secondary, tertiary, and remedy is meant to display, and that is consistent with other departments within the county that are providing supports for young people as well as adults along that continuum. So this is just meant to try to connect the work that we do to other county departments. So we can move on to the next set of slides where I'll talk a little bit more about each one of these programs. So on the development end, we start working with young people in communities. We have what are called youth development networks that are housed in various geographies around LA County that have been identified, where we provide prevention services, a variety of services from mentoring to workforce, after school programs, sports programs, lots of programs, lots of things that any young person could benefit from. Again, with the goal of providing resources to keep kids out of the system in the first place. We also are expanding that into school partnerships, working with specific schools that have challenges with chronic absenteeism, as well as overall negative school climate. That is a program that is about to launch in the coming months. And then finally, in that prevention arena, we have youth diversion, which again provides a second opportunity for a young person to address a challenge that they faced, have that not affect them for the rest of their lives, and help address the general cause. And we'll save that because Marjan is going to go into detail about that. We can go to the next slide. For young people who have come into deeper contact with law enforcement, they found themselves arrested and going through the court procedure, in many cases already incarcerated. We have our Youth Justice Supports and Services Department. We're working in the community with young people that are facing court hearings, as well as young people who have returned home, right? We have very strong programs. Our reentry program, which is called RAY, supports young people once they return to community with a myriad of services, including financial supports, a monthly stipend, and access to money that they may need for school, for uniforms, for equipment, for emergency assistance related to housing or utilities, that type of thing, that we also offer. Again, this meeting could be super long, and hopefully in a few months or whenever it's appropriate, we can come back and go specifically into the programs that support young people that have come into contact with the carceral system. Underlying all of this, though, is our goal for decarceration. We don't want young people in the system unless they absolutely have to be there. So again, some of the work I mentioned earlier with OYCR, where we're working to decarcerate girls and gender expansive youth. We're working with the courts to try to identify young people who really have to be in the system based on their safety or public safety. But we want that number to continue to decline and to provide resources instead of incarceration. The next slide. The next two branches within our department really support our overall work. We certainly want to do good work, but we don't want to be the best kept secret, right? So we want folks to know. So we want to communicate what's happening. We want to counter the negative narrative that is out there regarding public safety and young people. We want to tell that story with data as well as with anecdotal stories. And we certainly want to share those best practices in various learning collaborative situations. So that is what Taylor's particular branch is charged with providing. Next slide. And this one is kind of the boring slide. We gotta pay the bills. We gotta write the checks. We got a budget. We have to hire people. So of course we have an administrative branch that supports that work. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Marjan Gadarzi. I certainly will be here to answer any questions that you all may have later on.
Thank you, David. Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Marjan Gudarzi, and I am the director of the diversion program at DYD. I'm going to spend a little chunk of time on this slide real quick because knowing that there's folks from various jurisdictions across the state, I really want to get at this question of how we got here, how this model for diversion that we now practice every single day in LA County came to be. So I'm going to take you back and share a little history. prior to 2017, there was lots of efforts amongst stakeholders across the county that were concerned about and doing work around the high levels of arrests that were happening in Los Angeles County with young people, like that has been mentioned. You know, even though that number had decreased since the early 2000s, even in 2015, we were seeing numbers over 13,000 of young people that were coming into contact with law enforcement and being cited and arrested. And so in 2017, the Board of Supervisors in LA County unanimously passed a motion to bring together those stakeholders in what was called the Youth Diversion Subcommittee to really create an opportunity for folks from across sectors to discuss and think through what a model of youth diversion could look like in Los Angeles. And folks came together with a real sense of openness, a real sense of starting from scratch, folks with thoughts and opinions from both ends of the spectrum around what a diversion model in the county would look like. And there was lots of policy negotiations that happened, specifically around things like data sharing, confidentiality, who were the providers and CBOs that were going to be doing this work, and what would they need to be doing with young people in order for a diversion to happen. But a real big point of the conversation was around eligibility. Who was going to be eligible for diversion? And again, there was this real sense of openness of starting from scratch and really thinking about what was eligibility going to be and what was that ceiling? What were the parameters around eligibility? And like I said, there were folks on either end of the spectrum, folks that believe that diversion should be exclusive to status offenses, very low level situations for young people. And then there were other folks that argued for diversion to be exclusive to felonies, because that's where we could make the most impact, right? And so essentially, this dialogue and healthy debate continued amongst stakeholders. And I don't know if I mentioned, but the stakeholders that were convened were folks from the public defender's office, the district attorney's office, law enforcement agencies, community organizations and advocates, but most importantly, young people who had been impacted by the justice system. And so eventually, folks identified a sort of legal precedent that kind of formulated what that ceiling was going to be and what the parameters were going to be. So, a section of the Welfare and Institutions Code was identified that said that young people who were charged with certain high-level offenses, which are categorized as 707B offenses, had to appear before a judicial officer. And so that kind of became a grounding point for a ceiling for which there would be some level of limitation around who was eligible for diversion and who was not. So some of those very high level offenses being not eligible, but then leaving a lot of room for still felony charges to be diverted, especially because there is a sort of discretionary choice when deciding when a young person is being charged with a 707B, but there's also several felony charges that are not 707B offenses. And then, of course, misdemeanors, infractions. So that's where we landed. That's where we landed today. That's where we exist today with all cases that are not 707B offenses being eligible to be received as diversions from law enforcement agencies. And our partnerships and our model have evolved over time too. So a couple years after we initiated the county's model, we also developed a relationship with the district attorney's office where there was an opportunity to divert cases that law enforcement had not diverted, and the DA identified as diversion eligible, and also an opportunity to even dig into some of those 707B offenses that the district attorney would identify could benefit from diversion, especially a restorative justice process. So you can go to the next slide. So I want to share a little bit about what the diversion model is. And it's kind of this triad relationship that we have with the Department of Youth Development really being the kind of coordinating body, the body that provides technical assistance, supports the relationship building amongst law enforcement agencies, to support the diversion referrals coming into us and then to our contracted CBOs. So the CBOs are the folks that are contracted with us. Law enforcement agencies are the folks that we really build organic relationships with, and then develop MOUs, memorandums of understanding, to kind of set a foundation for how we're all going to work together. But it's that partnership agreement that kind of sets the foundation for how we're all going to work together. A little more specificity around eligibility, communication, and just the diversion process in general. But DYD contracts the community organization and funds them to do the work that they do. And it's free of cost for law enforcement agencies. You can go to the next slide. So a little bit diving deeper into the partnership process, right? So how do we develop these partnerships with law enforcement agencies when there's no legal requirement that law enforcement participates in diversion? With some of our larger agencies like Los Angeles Police Department, the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, there's kind of a more natural process that happens because those folks were really at the table when we were engaged in the subcommittee work to plan the model. But for some of those municipal departments across the county, that maybe had no idea that this model was being created, it's really a process of knocking on their door or knocking on their inbox, and really asking for a conversation and really explaining what diversion is, the process, the why, and why it's important, and why it also supports their goals of public safety. Like David mentioned, youth development is public safety. So that's how these partnerships have been built organically through our staff, communicating with law enforcement agencies, establishing these shared co-created MOUs with the law enforcement agency, the community organization that they are assigned to work with based on geography. We also work with the community providers to support law enforcement in training, again, around the process of diversion, but also around the why. Why does this matter? Why? And Taylor will get into more of our data outcomes, but how is diversion important in terms of recidivism, and how does it compare to the traditional justice system that we've been used to? We create quarterly data briefs where we bring in the data to the conversation with law enforcement so we can show comparatively what's being diverted and what's continuing to be booked through the traditional system. So we can have robust conversations around advocating for increased diversion where appropriate. And we do all types of goal setting to expand our trust with law enforcement. It doesn't happen overnight. We don't instantly walk into a law enforcement agency and they start, diverting car thefts or larcenies. Sometimes it starts with very low-level situations like vandalism or property crimes. And we build trust through there by establishing that our CBOs are experts and skilled at working with young people to really address core issues. You can go to the next slide. A little bit, you might be asking yourself, well, what do the providers do once they get a referral of a young person being diverted from a law enforcement agency when that young person comes into contact with them? They do all types of things. Our services, one thing that makes our model very, very unique is that there is no cookie cutter approach to how our providers work with young people. It was a core component of what was discussed in the youth diversion subcommittee that services would be tailored to the needs of the youth, that young people would be met where they were at. And so our providers create individual co-created care plans with the young person's support system, with their family, with their guardians, and identify the types of services that they need to both address all the underlying things that might be going on in their life, but also what's at the root of the specific incident that they found themselves in. And that could include any of these things here on the slide. I'll highlight in particular our emphasis on restorative and transformative justice practices. Restorative justice is the practice of bringing together the young person who committed some sort of harm with the party that was harmed, and creating a facilitated mediation where a young person is able to recognize the harm that was created. They're also able to name the harm that they have experienced in their own life. And there is a sort of mediation and repair that is created that sometimes involves the young person paying back restitution, offering their services to repair whatever has happened. But along with that restorative justice mediation process that involves bringing the harmed person to the table, there's all these other types of services that our providers are offering to support a young person's success, their ability to thrive, their ability to engage in the interests that they have, and their ability to address some of the things that are holding them back. And you can go to the next slide. So I want to give you a little context of what's going on right now. We have been experiencing a little bit of a dip, or we were experiencing a little bit of a dip in our referrals towards, as we transitioned from 2024 into 2025, we did see a decrease in our law enforcement agency referrals coming in, as well as referrals from the district attorney's office. As you may know, we had a local election in 2024, at the end of 2024, and we had a change in administration of the district attorney's office. So there were new ideas, new ways of thinking that were coming into the county that we definitely think had an impact, as well as some, changes that happened at the federal level as well, had an impact on the way people were thinking about diversion and thinking about more rehabilitative practices towards young people. And so we have seen some the referral numbers going down a bit. Things have started to stabilize in 2025, and we've definitely seen specific partnerships actually start to go back up. Specifically, I'll name the district attorney's office. We've done very, very deep relationship building work with the DA's office, meeting with them on a monthly basis, listening more to them about what they need in terms of data and feedback loops. And we've actually seen from 2025, quarter one, 2024, quarter four, the referrals double now in quarter two of 2025, and we'll hopefully be seeing the same thing and even increased referrals in our quarter three data. So we're hoping that things are trending up, but it's just to name that as the kind of pendulum swings within in society and how folks view things like diversion, we have to step in and do even more work to explain the why and the impact that diversion has on young people's lives. You can go to the next slide. So just wanting to name a little bit of what's next. What's our focus as a team, as a department in terms of diversion? We are always working to increase referrals. Our job is never done unless we are at 100% of eligible referrals received. That's always our goal. So we're always advocating for more pathways for diversion and just increased diversion with the partners that we already have. We're also working with our community organizations to really, support the work that they do. One thing that's a big sticking factor for law enforcement agencies is making sure that young people, once they're referred, actually get enrolled into the program in a timely manner. And so we're working to make sure that that's happening so that we can strengthen our partnerships and also so that young people are getting the services that they need really quickly. Strengthening our record sealing oversight. We are, backed by the Welfare and Institutions Code that supports the record sealing of a young person after they complete diversion. And the oversight around that and how that works can get a little tricky. And so we have lots of strategies around how we are making sure that a young person who completes diversion actually does have their record sealed. Expanding training for our community organizations and learning so that we can increase their skills and expertise so they can continue to support young people with various levels of charges and various levels of needs. And really expanding our efforts to just reduce the school to prison pipeline and foster care to prison pipelines with various partnerships that we have with DCFS that we're piloting, that we actually are going to be expanding soon. As well as finding other, really essentially as if diversion is denied at one point, really finding out through other partnerships how we can advocate for diversion at other points, which is shown through our partnership with the district attorney's office, for example. And I think I'm passing it to Taylor now. Let me just check what the next slide is. Okay, yes, this is Taylor's turn. So thank you all, and I will look forward to any questions that you might have, but I'm going to pass it to Taylor to discuss our data and the evidence around how great diversion is. Let's go ahead, Taylor.
Thank you so much, Marjan. And we will try to answer questions in the chat as they come up, but some that might require slightly longer answers, just so you all know we see and we'll answer in Q&A at the end. But hello, everybody. I am so excited to talk with you all about the evidence supporting the diversion model that you've just heard from Marjan. I will also in the interest of time, and so that we can get to questions from you all as quickly as possible, we'll go pretty quickly through these slides, but there's so much more information here. And if anyone loves some good data like I do, feel free to ask questions here or reach out to me afterwards. Always happy to talk more. And I'll start this section by just saying a huge goal of ours from the beginning of the county's collaborative youth diversion work in Los Angeles County has really been to acknowledge that the state of evidence around what works to support youth well-being and reduce youth justice system involvement in diversion across the nation is really varied. And when we were starting this work in LA, it was a little hard for us to point really clearly to something that said, definitely do this. It's really clear that this model works for youth diversion. And so we were able to find our way through that process and pull what did exist from other jurisdictions all around the country, the state, in our own communities. But we had to do a lot of that pulling together because the evidence, the sort of like research base around diversion at the time, and I think still today, although it has really improved, was a little bit all over the place. There are so many different models, so many different ways that folks were implementing diversion programs all around the country. And so we really wanted to help contribute to shared knowledge and be able to share back with other communities all around, the state and the country, what we were finding was really working. So for us, it's really been important that evidence has informed program design all across our continuum of services in Los Angeles. And we also have an internal research and evaluation team, and that was a really intentional choice so that we have like day-to-day data informing our work and making sure that we know when our programs are needing some improvement to be more equitable or more effective or more impactful for youth and families. And then last year, we were really, really excited to be able to publish what was a long time in the making, a multi-year process, outcome, equity, and cost benefit analysis that we were able to partner with RDA Consulting on for a really comprehensive external evaluation of the diversion program model that we had built together with partners in Los Angeles. I will share a little bit about the sort of major findings of that evaluation today, but I also just want to share a little bit of a preview that what's next for us in terms of this goal of increasing shared knowledge and evidence around youth diversion and what it looks like to create alternatives to justice system involvement for young people include us really building a new and improved data system to support strong evidence across our full program continuum. That's been our focus in the last year, and we're really excited that that is moving forward. We are also working on expanding our youth participatory action research work, so opportunities for young people in Los Angeles to be leaders in research and evaluation themselves. And then we're also really looking forward to follow up deeper dive evaluation and research projects to, go deeper into questions that were raised by this first round. Next slide, please. Thank you. The big finding from our evaluation that, I think we believed that our program model was working and that our incredible community providers and referral partners were doing really strong work, but we were surprised how strong the data was on the impact DYD's diversion model was having on recidivism in particular. So the big finding from our evaluation was that 95% of young people who even just enrolled in DYD's diversion programs stayed out of trouble with the legal system a year after their enrollment. So this, if you're familiar with recidivism rates in general, specifically rates of rearrest and return to justice system involvement for young people who go through traditional justice system processes, how surprising this number is. This is basically a 5% recidivism rate for the diversion program. Um, and for us, we looked at, I mean, I can go into details of how we measured this, but we looked at, every possible sort of point of contact with the justice system to combine into this statistic. There's much more detail in the full evaluation. But what I want to highlight for you all is that this result was statistically significant. This improvement in preventing recidivism, it was statistically significant and equitable by race, ethnicity, gender, and age. So for us, what that means is that this finding, this impact, is consistent, and it was consistent, across the board for all young people. I also want to say, David Carroll mentioned this earlier, but the important nuance in this finding is that although diversion improves outcomes and reduces future justice system involvement for all young people overall, it is most effective, or it has the greatest impact in comparison to young people who don't have access to diversion, for young people with the highest level, the most serious alleged offenses. So this is really important for us as we think about opportunities to improve and keep pushing to expand referrals in our jurisdiction. And also, I want to say that part of what this finding, what's behind this finding, is the fact that this is what we see when young people do have access to diversion, when they are referred and are able to enroll. But we know that referrals continue to be inequitable in our county and in many jurisdictions across the country, meaning that young people, especially Black young people and other youth of color, have less access to diversion as an alternative to arrest than their peers. And this is a continued priority for us to try to figure out how to move the needle on that access, this sort of disproportionate access for youth of color. The other key findings from our evaluation were that our diversion model is cost effective. And actually, our external evaluators found that enrolling in the youth diversion program saved the county about $40,000 per young person compared to the costs of arrest or court. This for us is really important as we, continue to think about what it looks like to invest sustainably in youth development and in alternatives to youth justice system involvement. And then in many ways, our most important finding was that enrolling in diversion also improved strengths and protective factors for not only young people, but their families as well. So through qualitative interviews and assessment of, pre and post surveys, we really saw that social emotional well-being, social support, emotional regulation, school engagement, caring relationships, and the ability to have strong conflict resolution skills improved, again, not only for young people, but their families. So that is a very quick evaluation overview. Again, I would love to talk more, and I'm going to pass it back to David Carroll to wrap us up.
Thank you. So I appreciate you all, engaging in the chat. Hopefully we've answered a lot of the questions, but certainly want to field any additional questions that you may have. The one thing I failed to mention, though, was that everything we do is through community-based organizations. I know I mentioned centering community, but I wanted to just put a finer point on all of our programs, whether it be in-facility diversion or otherwise, are facilitated through trusted community-based partners. So with that, any questions?
I am just so impressed with all the work. Phenomenal presentation. Thank you so much. And I was asking many questions in the chat, and I really want to connect with you after, but I'm just sort of curious about the funding structure. I saw where you said grants. Are we thinking, is it way more foundations, way more state and federal, way more, like what's your sort of a split on your funding for a program, for a whole department like this? And are you getting any money from county general fund?
So we, fortunately, in the current economic kind of crisis, do not receive a huge percentage of what's called net county cost, NCC county funding, because that was cut roughly about 10% for all departments. So some departments, parks, for example, they really suffered from losing that funding. We get quite a bit of funding that is aimed at juvenile justice and preventing young people coming into contact with the system. So JJCPA funding, JJRBG, which is for the kids
RPG
who
too.
are
Okay.
in facility, that resulted from the closure of the statewide youth incarceration facilities. AB 109 is another funding stream. In LA, there was an initiative where folks put it on the ballot. It was actually called Measure J. It's called CFCI now, Care First Community Investment. Basically, where the county took a percentage of the unrestricted money and put it towards prevention programs, Care First programs, not just for young people. So we receive a significant amount of CFCI funding. Some other departments actually provide some funding, Department of Mental Health, probation in some cases for some of the programming that we provide in the facilities. Um, in terms of philanthropic funding, we do receive some, primarily for things that the county won't pay for, youth stipends, professional development for staff. We try to funnel some of that funding to our actual CBOs because we know that they struggle with things like IT systems and data systems and things like that, that unfortunately our county contracts can't pay for.
Right.
We are always advocating for our providers to receive some of that funding also. Taylor, did you have anything else that you wanted to add?
No, I think you covered it brilliantly, David.
Thank
And
you.
Kate, just maybe the one thing I'll say, if this is interesting to you, since you're asking about funding, is I think you heard David talking about this, but we are, a big focus of ours has been to really create a sustainable county investment in this work, and it continues to be the goal. So we're always thinking about, what other sustainable funding sources we can tap into.
You all may see this, but just in case, there's a couple questions, great questions about logic model, articulating the impact of arts. And there's an OYCR question from Jessica Brooks.
Please, I don't see it if you can.
Oh, yeah, no problem. So Ramon Ramos asks, do you have a logic model? Oh, I just lost it. Do you have a logic model of the diversion program? We'll start there.
I'm going to pass that to Taylor and Marjan.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Ramon. Marjan and I were just looking for one that we do have. It's been a while since it's been updated, but we do have one, and so we might ask if you could share your email in the chat. Anyone who's interested in seeing our draft logic model will find it, make sure it's still, it sort of reflects some of the latest evolution of the program in the last year or so, and then we can share it.
And we're happy to put that in with our follow-up email to the whole group, if that makes it easier.
Yeah. I just saw a comment from Ashley Shearer. I have heard such wonderful things about what's happening in New Zealand. And it has been on the back burner to get a contact there to learn more about the work. Because probably every 6 months I hear someone brings up the work. So I would love if you could, put your information in the chat for us to somehow connect. Because again, I've heard just some wonderful things. I also see where Julian mentioned wanting to start something like this for Mendocino. It is our goal. Again, nothing that we do is proprietary or confidential. So we would love to provide you with any resources that you need to begin to advocate for a care first approach in your particular county or your geography. So feel free to reach out. Use the materials that we sent, but if you want to reach out for a meeting, we'd love to meet with you. And again, the goal is to expand this. We know that, so goes California. The rest of the country, tends to follow things that work here. And we would love to expand these types of programs across the state and the country.
I love this question from Sabra Williams. They ask, how do you articulate the impact of the arts in the space?
I was gonna take that question. Thank you, Sabra. I think one thing that makes the diversion model in LA County really unique and how we work with providers and how we bring providers on board that I kind of mentioned a little bit earlier is that we really identify organizations that can service and support the interests and the needs of young people in a really large variety of ways. And access to the arts, arts through healing or healing through the arts, arts education, is one of those pieces that we ask that our providers are able to demonstrate, either internally or have access to partnerships in their network, that they can, provide arts healing through arts, arts education, for young people that are diverted. And what we make sure to do is to communicate to law enforcement, just to be transparent, that we are really going in and working with law enforcement and helping them to understand the value in how our providers approach the work, and not necessarily, taking what law enforcement might traditionally think of as, you know, some accountability pieces. Like maybe they think of a young person gets diverted and they have to do community service hours, and then we are kind of reflecting that thinking back. No, our young people are not simply completing community service hours and checking off various boxes. There's a real tailored care plan that addresses not only their needs but their interests. And so we make sure to communicate that the arts is one of the types of services, one of the types of things that a young person could be engaged in their time working with one of our providers. And it could be a very fundamental part of the care plan that is created for them. So definitely some of our CBOs, some of our diversion providers, center the arts a little bit more in the work that they do, but other providers also have close partnerships with other folks in their network that they can refer young people to, where that's needed and wanted by a young person.
I think we're just about at time, but certainly want to thank everyone for their attention and allowing us to present. Again, feel free to reach out to us via email, and we're happy to fill in any gaps we may have missed today. Again, thank you to OYCR and the team. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Mika to close us out.
Thank you guys for your time. I'm Mika. I'm part of the Youth Advisory Board. I just want to thank you guys for all the insight that you guys shared. You guys are so appreciated. The work you guys are doing is very valuable and greatly appreciated by my board members. We thank you guys for sharing your insight and experiences today, and thank everyone for joining today. We invite all of you to complete the survey to provide feedback on today's experience in today's webinar, and you can find that link in the chat. We also have a few closing announcements as we end the webinar. We'd like to remind everyone that the webinar recording will be available on the OYCR website within a week, and you'll receive a link to the recording along with the slides in a follow-up email. There's also save the date for the next webinar for the Youth Justice Action Series on Tuesday, December 16th at noon, where we'll be joined by leadership from Forward Change to highlight the soon-to-be-published report, Fewer Chutes, More Ladders, Preventing Juvenile Legal Involvement and Ensuring Successful School Reentry for California Youth. And the link to register will be in the chat. And that concludes today's webinar. Thank you again for joining us, and we hope to see you guys next month. Thank you. Have a great rest of the afternoon.